Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angelica Perez, and I am the Program Director of the Rising Scholars Program. And I'll let my colleague introduce himself.
I am Brian Hirayama, and I am the lead faculty for the Rising Scholars Program, but more specifically working with our formerly incarcerated student population.
And just a quick background, as I mentioned, I'm the Program Director of our Rising Scholars Program. And what we do is we provide face-to-face college education classes inside incarceral settings. So whether they be state institutions, private facilities, juvenile female facilities, or CCTRP facilities, which are basically facilities where incarcerated individuals are now coming out to the community and are still incarcerated, but they're having jobs, they're coming onto our campuses, which kind of leads us into the next venture of our journey, where we're now serving students that are coming to the main campus as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So just an overview of what we're going to discuss. Basically, providing higher education opportunities to justice-involved individuals. And justice-involved, I just kind of want to talk about that term really quick. So this is basically anyone who's come into contact with the criminal justice system, whether they've been arrested, in probation, serving parole, been incarcerated. The length of time doesn't necessarily matter, and neither does the age, if they're a youth offender as well. When you come from a county like ours, Kern County, we are surrounded by prisons. We have numerous juvenile hall facilities, and when these individuals get out, they come home and they come into our community, and we as a community need to realize how we can best serve these individuals so they can get back on track and are less likely to reoffend. The other thing that we're going to talk about are the barriers that these individuals are facing when trying to receive their education, trying to find jobs, access these educational programs, and the stigma that's associated with them. And then we're also going to highlight the different programs besides the community college system that can help these students in pursuing higher education. And, I just want to touch on this real quick. I'm sorry I didn't mention it beforehand, but if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will actually address them as we go. The last thing we want to do is wait till the end and someone's forgotten their question or they have to leave. We do want to honor everyone's time, and we want to be able to provide as much information as possible on this topic. So this next slide is just a bit of data. So I don't know if some folks know this, but the United States is one of the world's leaders in incarceration. Now, depending on how you frame the question, we do actually go back and forth with a few countries, but we are definitely always top three. So the United States has less than 5% of the world's population, but about 25% of the world's prisoners. Now, when we're looking at this data, one of the things we really want to look at is why is that number so high? So we've had different initiatives like Tough on Crime and a lot of legislation that really focused on the war on drugs. So we had a lot of folks that are incarcerated at outstanding sentences, I would say. And of course, once you're in prison, there's different factors that can lead to you staying incarcerated longer. So a lot of this does play into the fact why the data is what it is. The prison industry inside the United States is such a huge industry. And it wasn't till recently that rehabilitation was actually included into part of the correctional system. So now there's been a lot of emphasis on these programs to rehabilitate folks, and this is just beyond any mental health. They're looking at substance abuse, higher education, vocational programs to really try to combat this number. And one of the things we want to highlight too is that the cost of incarceration, it costs so much to house incarcerated folks and to also employ folks to monitor them, to provide these services. So as a nation, it is kind of our responsibility to reduce this debt and find out solutions that are more cost effective and are effective across the board. So just to touch on that, on the Obama administration, they really wanted to try to tackle this issue as far as criminal justice reform. So the three main areas of focus that they were looking at were community, courtroom, and the cell block. So they really want to look at what community resources are available, one, to provide preventive measures to prevent folks from getting incarcerated at the juvenile hall level, at the adult level, and then what in the courtroom is fair. Another interesting fact about Kern County, where we're housed at, is we are what's considered a plea mill. A lot of folks are advised incorrectly, and that does lead to them taking a plea that isn't necessarily fair or in their favor. The other thing that we want to focus on again too is what they're actually doing in their time with their time while they're incarcerated. Is that time being used productively? We understand that there's work assignments, there's mandatory programming, but what is actually preparing these individuals to be ready to re-enter society? Again, I don't think it's just one program that's the most effective. It's a collaboration of programs, and most importantly, a support system for once individuals are released. I'm not sure how many folks are familiar with what a release used to look like, but basically, people would just walk out of prison one day and with a few $100 in their pocket, and it's like, good luck. Hope you. And actually, a lot of times we've heard this from students that they'll say they'll leave the light on for you, and we're waiting for you to come back. It's very disheartening to hear, especially when you work with this population, because they're real people too. And a lot of them really do want to leave and change their trajectory, but there's so many systems in place that aren't targeting the specific needs of this population. And again, the likelihood to reoffend is there, and that's what we're trying to prevent. And again, too, the benefits of it too are safer communities, and of course, more well-rounded. And embracing these individuals also embraces the faults in our system too. How can we make those better? There's always room for improvement, and that's just kind of how we have to take it.
Two things I'd like to add to that. The plea mill comment that Angelica made just moments ago, we actually had the ACLU come out and do a conversation because Kern County and specifically Bakersfield, the way that we plea that folks in misdemeanor charges has been really egregious, and they're actually filing lawsuits against the court system for these very issues. So it's something that's on the radar of many out and about. And there's a generational consequence and benefit for us being involved in educating folks. So, as anyone else knows, if you had someone in your family go to college, that's now a viable path for you. And for many of the students that we serve inside, especially, they've been disenfranchised by the educational system, and they may be the first person in their family to ever go to college, even though they're doing it on a maximum security prison yard. So there's generational consequences and benefits for us to serve these students. And really, it's a community service that, places like us at California Community College, we really are obligated to serve this population of students.
So real quick, I want to feature this graph. As I had mentioned, incarceration rates went up extremely, and a lot of this had to do with the sentencing and the legislature changes that had occurred. Now, recently, within the past 5 years, there's also legislation that have changed certain offenses, such as how minors are being charged with adult offenses, at what age individuals are sent to adult institutions. And of course, now that we're introducing college programming, in these past 5 years, we've shown higher education in prison is effective. A lot of times it's teaching them skills that maybe they didn't have before. So for example, when we first started our program, one of the degree paths that we offered was communication. And what's extremely important about that is now these individuals are learning how to organize their thoughts, advocate for themselves, effectively communicate their points across. And this has had a positive effects on their relationships in prisons, relationships with their family. And of course, too, when they go to parole boards, they can accurately explain why they've changed, what their goals are. And we've, not just us, a lot of colleges across the board, but we've been seeing folks go home. So college is impactful. And again, we've proved that it's effective. And what's really cool right now is now they're looking at introducing BA programs in an incarceral setting as well. So these folks that aren't necessarily going to go home right away still have options to pursue higher education while they're incarcerated. So this is still in the beginning stages, but it's a really cool thing to see. And another interesting thing about this chart is, as you can see, the data ends at 2020. But what not a lot of people realize is it takes about 3 to 5 years to accurately collect data on recidivism. So the first 3 years is the most crucial. So that's something that when you're collecting data that you're checking. But once you made it past the 5-year mark, it's pretty comfortable to say that's where this individual has made it. And he's more likely to be successful and not reoffend. We've made it past the 5 years. All right, and on this slide, I just kind of want to talk about some of these recidivism rates as well. I mean, there's a really big stigma in working with the incarcerated population. First and foremost, not everyone who's in prison has access to education. So the prison still has to provide services such as GED, high school equivalency. Unfortunately, some of the folks that are in there, a lot of them are not even at an elementary level education, which kind of explains some things maybe in their decision-making process as to what led to crime or why they maybe chose to commit certain crimes such as property crime in order just to survive. There's a lot of different factors that can go into this, but they're not violent offenders. Usually when they join our program, they have to have a certain amount of time where they've been in good behavior. And the best part about it is our program is it's a voluntary program. So it doesn't take priority over the mandatory programming. So these are students that want to be a part of this, that want to get a higher education. And they want to be able to communicate with their family and show them that I'm making positive steps towards changes. And again, not only does it change an incarcerated individual's way of thinking, it has a positive effect on the whole family. They're now showing that their friends and family members and their children that education is possible from anyone. And our big thing on our program is we don't try to dumb down the program at all. They're completing the same classes any students would on the main campus. However, we do have the lack of technology, which in fact makes it that much harder for these students to complete the work. So, but they get the work done, and that's what's really great about this student population. And just to go back on the recidivism rate, so not everyone in our program or in prison is serving time for murder. I want to throw it out there because, again, these are real human beings that just made poor decisions. A lot of the time, the recidivism rates are most high for folks that are committing property crimes. So again, a lot of this has to do to, a lot of times stealing, whether it's car, food, money, whatever, again, as a means of survival, because that's all they've known and it's the easy hustle to go back to. But it gets you caught, so it's not effective. A lot of times too, we see folks that have been in prison the longest do have a hard time coming back out because that's the only life they know, and now they're putting it back into communities that aren't necessarily able to serve them. They don't have a long work history. Some of them don't have a college education, and they don't have family to come back to. So, and looking at those reasons for recidivism, it gives us a checklist of all the areas that we need to address when working with this population. Take it away, Brian.
Okay. For us to really serve these students, I mean, it can't be stressed enough that education becomes a leveraging agent for them to change their lives and their future. Employment opportunities and prospects, their earning potential. I mean, we've all seen the graphs and data about if someone has a high school diploma versus an AA degree versus a bachelor's degree. As was mentioned earlier by Angelica, having an education has a direct impact on recidivism rates, probably just because, and I haven't seen a ton of research like the causal relationship, but just having education, knowing other options are out there for you, having employment opportunities, having secure housing, all has an impact on ideas of recidivism. It does promote, of course, growth and development. Just like any of us, as we went through college, and the person that we started as definitely wasn't, who we ended as, and we continue through education, training, and exposure to different ideas. to grow and develop, just as these students continue to grow and develop through their education. And, when you support someone that's involved in the criminal justice system and you provide them with education, it helps to break that cycle of incarceration. And again, you're introduced to different people that are not necessarily like-minded. For those who are more what some might call career criminals, you're now breaking out of a group of peers that you have different ideas. You have people that have different aspirations. So there are a ton of positive outcomes for individuals and for society for promoting education and successfully, having that education for them. If we can go ahead and move forward there, Angelica. Before we go on to the next slide, though, and start talking about some of this, is there any questions from the group? I'd love to field, or we would love to field any questions if folks have some so far. Let me see the chat. Okay. Well, at any time, if you can unmute yourself or raise your hand and we can call on you, or maybe the moderator can help us, that would be great. Obviously, for students that are getting out, there are a ton of barriers to pursuing higher education. All week, I've been walking students through a variety of issues, from financial aid issues. Like, we had a student that's enrolled in the college here, but unfortunately, if you don't have your GED or high school diploma, that makes you ineligible for certain financial aid. They enrolled in the classes under the impression that they would qualify for this, and now they're scrambling to figure out how they can afford some of the resources that's necessary to complete the courses, which we've been able to find answers for. But it's difficult. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm a student myself right now, and just filling out the financial aid form as an adult who knows how to navigate complex organization and structures, it's still difficult for me to navigate those systems, and then complicate that with someone who's been incarcerated for 25 years, has never owned their own cell phone. Last time they were on a computer, it was a little turtle making designs. Like, that's a huge obstacle for people to overcome. So, they could be quite limited in their educational resources and who to tap into if they needed help or guidance. Many of our students who have maybe a niece or a nephew that is attending college as well, might have to lean on them. And again, that's a 25-year difference. Obviously, too, stigma and discrimination is something that students constantly face. Many of us are familiar with that imposter syndrome. Even as a returning student, or even as a first-year student, if you're from a small town and you went to a big university, you may feel like you don't belong and all these smart kids surround you. That can obviously be complicated by someone who's spent most of their life in prison, who has a criminal record, who doesn't look necessarily like everybody else, and definitely doesn't think of themselves like a traditional college student. Just the other day, I walked an individual over to our enrollment, to our enrollment people, and he sat there and basically told them their entire life story as they were just trying to walk them through how to click certain buttons to, say what groups they belong to. But he wanted them to know that he had a criminal record, and that maybe that has to do with some of the stigma that he faces. And if he gets out in front of it and tells people first, then they can judge him less. And I don't know if that's the case for everybody, but it's just an example of some of the stigma and discrimination stuff that they feel threatened by and have to overcome. Also, many of them, lack academic preparation, even in the programming that exists inside of prisons. And this is no shots fired and no pun intended towards the prison, but many of them are doing this through correspondence or through their at their own pace. They haven't been necessarily with somebody that's going to expect a certain level of rigor, which we do. We uphold that rigor and integrity. And just how to navigate Canvas, or how to how they're supposed to present ideas in a college classroom can be something they're still unfamiliar with, even if they've taken college classes inside a prison. And there's a lack of institutional support. I mean, even today, a program of our size and the different tentacles that we have out into our college community, I'm still discovering people that are also involved in this type of work on my own campus, but we don't have a strong pipeline between us. So And you can imagine then how that creates other obstacles. Like if they go over here and they get some answers, how that might complicate it. Once they find us, it's like, well, why weren't we put in contact earlier? Like I could have used your services much earlier in my college experience. So, their institutional support and resources can definitely create obstacles and barriers for students in their higher education. So we can go ahead and move forward, Angelica. You, me, both?
I guess we could both talk about it. So just real quick, this is just to highlight some of the resources that are available at different levels. So at the community college level, we have the Rising Scholars Network, and we are a network of all the community colleges that are operating within prisons, jails, juvenile hall facilities, some federal and detention facilities. And what we try to do is, now that we have this network inside of the prison, we try to help students as they're maybe transferring prisons, or if they're going to be attending another community college. The big emphasis is for folks to continue their education. So whether it's with us or another college, we want to make sure that that student has everything that they need to be successful in our end. So that means, if there's any hangups with transcripts, if there's a grade they're still waiting on, we try to assist in that area. Um, and another development that's going on in a pilot is there are now BA pilot programs inside certain prisons. Not many people are aware of this, but certain prisons have different security levels. So um, Cal State Los Angeles has been operating in a prison out in Lancaster, California, and they've been there for about 3 years. So a lot of the students, that's been the pie in the sky dream to get into this bachelor's program for communication. However, the reality is not everyone can make it there, even if they graduate with a degree. And a lot of this has to do with, again, the security levels. And of course, if they have enough time still to stay in prison at a certain security level to attend that program. So about 5 different BA pilot programs are just starting up, and they're collecting students for their cohorts for next fall. So this is a really exciting time for us at the community college level, because our students that have worked hard, have their associate degrees, have been doing everything that they need to do. This is an opportunity for them to actually be a part of a BA program and continue their education and graduate with a baccalaureate degree. So that's really exciting, and that's what's going on inside the prison. On the outside, beyond the community college system, we have Project Rebound, which is generally designated for Cal State, and they help students on the main campus. So if they're formerly incarcerated and now they need to help navigate the Cal State system, they are there for those students, and they're there to provide resources, mentorship, sometimes job opportunities for students. That's what we're doing at our level too, is providing students with jobs, whether they're peer mentors or just student workers. You're giving them a chance to gain work experience. And, whether it's my college's name or your college's name, that's a verified, valuable employer that now they can add to their resume as well. And then two, for underground scholars, so that's generally at the UC system, again, that they're there to support students on the main campus as well, giving students opportunities to be a part of an organization that helps other formerly incarcerated individuals succeed on the main campus as well, and also kind of open the doors for other students as well and bring awareness to the needs of formerly incarcerated individuals and how for them to be successful in achieving higher education.
And some of the other private colleges have groups like this. I know, for example, at USC, there's a underground group as well that works with formerly incarcerated and justice involved individuals. So, and this network continues to grow, and we build between each other. So we're, like, I was on the phone earlier with Project Rebound at Sac State, because we have a student that's going to be transitioning to their program inside. So, it's important that we build those warm handoffs between each other, because we never know where our students are going, but we want to make sure that it's smooth once they get there. I did see a question in the chat, or a couple of questions in the chat here. Let me pull it back up. So one of them was about the application process and whether or not there's a place for them to designate whether they've been system impacted. We are currently working on this. We are a ban the box state, but we at the community college, like we locally have some control over some questions, and it would be completely voluntary, and it would only be to gather like an affinity group, so we could contact students, provide that support, and then monitor their and be in constant mentorship with them. But you can understand a lot of people are very skeptical about letting people know that they've had, been formerly incarcerated. We are not, Angelica, correct me if I'm wrong, we do not do second chance Pell. That's at a level beyond that. And I think, a level beyond us. We have the California Promise, which then allows folks to attend school for free, but the Pell is something beyond our institutions. Is that right, Angelica?
Yes, that's correct. So luckily at our level, we have the California Promise Grant that pays for our students' tuition. What's going on right now in the state of California is we're getting a lot of funding to target this specific population. So a lot of us are utilizing our funds to help provide supplementary materials to students on the ed side and the outside to make sure that they have this funding available. And as far as tagging students, they're looking for a mechanism to do so because we know there's formerly incarcerated students on every main campus. And getting them to disclose that is the key to show why we need this certain amount of money to fund these students in order for them to be successful. So right now we're in a targeting stage for our students. So you'll see a lot of colleges doing a lot of creative things. And I would say one of our most successful things is food. A lot of people don't realize, even if you just put out food, people will come. And if you have a designated space for students too, they feel safe, they can eat their food, they can do their homework in peace, they can kind of disclose everything that's going on. And they'll tell you too, to be very honest, I'm having a hard time because of X, Y, and Z. And so for us, our school is taking a really boots on ground approach and building this rapport with our students because they're the subject matter experts in their own area. And that's the only way we're going to learn on how to improve our processes.
We've really taken on a case management approach. So, I'm the direct contact, for example, for formerly incarcerated students, but really we mirror it after our veterans program. Veterans have gotten it right on all kinds, our veterans programs that exist on campus have gotten it right on all kinds of levels. So we've been collaborating and borrowing some of their practices to see these students not only to enroll, but to finish.
To pursue their professional education. So, we are a band.
Sorry, it looks like Brian might have froze.
Oh, actually, we're in the same room, so.
Yeah, if he wants to just scoot over a little.
Can you undo the background so we can see both?
Make sure there.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry about that. We're a Ban the Box state, but we are, and again, we want the students to know this is a non-threatening voluntary disclosure, and it's only going to make you eligible for different resources and contact and mentorship. So we've proposed some language for our local application, which the community colleges have control over, individual community colleges have control over, and that's at the guidance from the chancellor's office and others. So we're hoping to get that implemented soon. But right now it's really word of mouth and just building our network through people, through humans, and being in different offices and different spaces. Yeah. So, from our perspective, if we're going to serve justice-involved students, we have to understand that many of them come from like the most marginalized, traumatized, and disenfranchised educational experiences, right? I used to ask students all the time, like, hey, could you tell me an instructor that really made a difference in your life, a teacher growing up, a coach? And not that students don't have them, some of them did, but many of them didn't have someone that they could identify as, yeah, this teacher really changed my life. And that was heartbreaking to me, but it speaks to the experiences of many of our students. You have to recognize that many of them may come from a patchwork of educational experiences, and many of them feel let down by adults and authority figures. Their living situation and support system may look very different than traditional and other even non-traditional students. So like, for example, we have students that are living in certain not like halfway houses that don't have consistent internet access. So they're doing, like Angelica was saying earlier, are doing work from their phones. which is completely impractical for most of the assignments that they might need to complete, like in a Canvas or Blackboard. So we have to kind of take that into consideration. And even just getting to campus and getting back, or trying to attend some type of talk that's going on. We just hosted a number of events for Second Chance Month. April is Second Chance Month. And many students can't even come to some of those events because they have to get special permission weeks in advance to get a pass to come to something that's outside of their normal schedule. As I was mentioning earlier too, obviously, you know, imposter syndrome is a real thing for every college student, potentially, but also when you add stigma and stereotype threat, you know, families putting pressure on them potentially to earn money because they've been incarcerated for this long and now it's time for them to give back. But also, you know, being marked in certain ways by tattoos, but being also marked by their criminal record, can be tough for them to, you know, feel like they fit in here until they see other people that are like them or have similar experiences, and now they feel some sense of camaraderie and brotherhood and sisterhood. So, you know, when you look at technology, when you look at finances, when you look at, you know, reacclimating to the mainstream, you know, we often, for those of us who haven't been in contact with the criminal justice system and been away from all the stimuli that exist, when you get back out here, again, after 25 years or 10 years or 5 years, things have changed a lot. Heck, if you shut off your technology for 5 days, you're going to find out that a lot of things have changed. So really trying to understand and from holistically, like what our students are going through. And even though we don't necessarily understand from a firsthand basis, like what can we do to try to build that understanding, demonstrate empathy, and then help them go where they need to go, right? So really just being a supportive force behind them. We'll move on here. Yeah, so get to know your students, recognize their living situations, recognize their limitations, their access and how that's different. You know, luckily for us, like we offer a free bus pass, as I know many colleges do, but even just getting back and forth to campus, even if it was just 2.5 miles away, could be a huge obstacle for somebody that doesn't have that. So, you know, recognizing those limitations and restrictions, trying to deal with past traumas. So we're thinking of ways, of course, to bring on speakers, other types of support, making sure all of our students are plugged in with EOPS, DSPS, our health and wellness center, so that they have, I mean, really the wraparound support that's necessary for any of us, though. I mean, any of us need a whole village of people helping us to see our way through. But oftentimes, many of our students, especially in this situation, feel alone and like an island. Not to mention, we can be very prideful people, all of us. We can be very stubborn, making sure that our students understand the work ethic that's involved in making it in college. This is not a walk in the park. Even though our campuses are filled with green grasses and flowers, this is hard. College is tough. When you look at the success rates of college acquisition, I mean, not everybody goes to college and not everybody makes it. So we need to be as supportive as possible, especially for this very special population. And there's so many opportunities and obstacles for their occupation restrictions. So looking at ways that we can help them to, I saw somebody in the chat say we did an expungement event. We also did one this year. And that's been a huge success for many people. So, you know, just looking for all the big ways, but also the very small ways. Again, Angelica was mentioning just having food in the office. We keep there's a locker here that people can store their things. So just knowing that their stuff is safe while they're out to class or they're going to be, you know, going around, that's been a way for them to come into our office, which we're also now tracking and making sure we know how many people are stopping by. So, you know, that's, you know, you really got to get to know your students, know their story. I mean, I don't pry or force any type of disclosure, but we know a lot about our students, and our students know about us, and we're not scared to share with them about our personal lives. For those of you who spend any time in prison, you know that sharing personal information can be a violation, right? It's a thing called overfamiliarity. So many of these students who are coming straight out of prison, they're not used to getting to know like authority figures on any level, you know, any personal level. So it's, you know, it's a kind of a 1 step forward, 2 steps back situation, but at least we're moving forward and we're picking up momentum. And if I'm talking too fast, you got to say something. And Andres, if there are things in the chat, you got to tell us because we can't see it on this dual screen.
Thanks, Brian. We are actually over time. I didn't want to cut you all off because This is really valuable information. So I really appreciate you both sharing that. I put in the chat for folks that are still here with us a link to the Rising Scholars program at Bakersfield College. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. If you want to connect with our colleagues at Bakersfield, we can try to make that happen and share some additional resources with you all. But I just want to thank you both so much for sharing the great work that you're all doing. You can tell the passion that these folks have for serving this really vital part of our community. And I can't thank them enough for taking the time to be with us today and sharing this vital information. So thanks again.
Thank you, Andrea.
you.
Sorry for going over. Thank you.
No worries. Important.